Welcome to the Midlife Fulfilled podcast. Are you over 40 and ready to truly thrive? Well, on this podcast, we go deep on ways to thrive across the 5 pillars of midlife: health, fitness, career, relationships, and legacy. I'm Bernie Borges, midlife advocate, life coach, and your host. Subscribe now and get ready to thrive. Dr. Mary Key, welcome to the Midlife Fulfilled podcast.
It's great to be here with you, Bernie.
Thank you, Mary. It's wonderful to have you. Mary, you are a very, very accomplished professional. I've had the distinct pleasure of knowing you in the local Tampa Bay business community for, I'm going to say it's close to 20 years now, if we actually do the math.
It's a good guess.
You are widely recognized as an accomplished international consultant, a lot of leadership consulting. You're a multi-time author, a speaker. You work with organizations across a variety of industries, just to name a few: healthcare, manufacturing, consumer products, financial institutions, retail, and more. You've written several books, including this one, Seizing Success, A Woman's Guide to Transformational Leadership. And here's the thing, Mary, I didn't invite you on the podcast to discuss what a wonderful, accomplished professional you are, even though there's easily a lot we can discuss there. But there's another dimension to you that I find very, very fascinating. I remember when you first introduced me to it, I was really blown away by it. You had a very harrowing experience and you nearly died. And I'm going to read something from your website, and then I'm going to invite you to really unpack it and we'll have a conversation around it. And here's from your website. It says, "It took 2 open heart surgeries for me to literally and spiritually learn about the true nature of living life with an open heart. When I distill the lessons learned, there are 3: letting go, surrendering to the situation, and forgiving everyone and expressing gratitude." So Mary, let's unpack those 3, because I know you've got a lot to share. Where would you like to begin?
Well, I think, Bernie, it might be nice just to chat a little bit about the background before I went in for heart surgery. So I've always been athletic. I had not been in a hospital overnight since I was born. I was at the peak of what I felt like the peak of my career, busy all the time. The one thing is I was going from one thing to the next and just noticed that I became highly task oriented, even in a relational practice that I really enjoyed. And so, what I was doing at the time is I started my own practice after having worked with 2 large consulting firms. And Inc. magazine hired me as a subcontractor to help them set up CEO roundtables around the country. So I was working with all these hard charging CEOs, helping them grow their businesses. And, the issues were always around things like merger acquisition, positioning myself for exit, how to make the business scalable, all of those things that, people in working on their companies are interested in. And I began to notice that I was getting breathy. And I was at an event, it was with my husband, and I was in a parking garage. And, because we both used to running up things, he goes, "Oh, let's not wait for the elevator. Let's just run up the stairs." And I stopped dead on one of the platforms. I just was overwhelmed. And I said, "I can't breathe really well right now." So we kind of didn't pay as much attention to it immediately. And once I got home, I called a cardiologist and I was examined and discovered that my heart went into AFib. And I had been seeing a cardiologist regularly, but I really didn't have any ill side effects up until this point. And my cardiologist looked me in the eye and said, "It's time." And I said, "It's time for what?" And he said, "It's time to have your mitral valve repaired. Since I was a kid, I had a condition called a regurgitation. So every time my heart would pump, there would be a big stream of blood that would go backward and then my heart would repump it. So your heart's a muscle." And my heart was growing. So it was, kind of following what it should be doing, but it was becoming too large for my chest cavity. So my first surgery, I thought it went really well. In fact, the blogs I sent you, the picture on it is of me recovering from my first heart surgery, which I thought, okay, I'm fine. I'm going to get right back into all of this and just pick up where I left off.
And
What a
that was open heart surgery?
Yes, it was open heart surgery and it was done in South Florida. And what happened was I had these symptoms where I began to lose extraordinary amounts of weight. Like I'm normally like a size 6 or 8, size 2 clothing started falling off me. And and I was sick and I would report to them and they would kind of blow me off and say, well, just come down here. And so finally I started spawning blood clots and couldn't walk. So I was rushed to the hospital locally and had to undergo emergency open heart surgery. So this
Mm,
time, what appeared to be a real tragedy to me, and I'm sure many people have felt this way when different health issues have arisen for themselves or from their families or loved ones. For me, it was serious because, first of all, I almost died. But when I was recovering, the doctor said to me, your ejection fraction, which is what gives your heart juice, should be about 52 and yours is 26. I don't think you're going to be able to work full time anymore unless the situation changes. You can just imagine, Bernie, I was crestfallen.
mm.
I just, so I thought, okay, if I'm not going to be able to work full time, what am I really passionate about? And I think if I can convey anything from my story to your viewers, it's that don't wait until a crisis to really sit down and say to yourself, what am I really passionate about? How do I want to spend the precious time I have left? There's all sorts of reasons. I have clients, I have to make money, to pay bills. And there's all these things, but when you begin to think about what's your heart's passion. So the book you held in your hand, Seizing Success, A Woman's Guide to Transformational Leadership, actually came from the experience of starting the Key Women's Leadership Forum. I decided that I really love facilitating roundtable groups for people in senior roles. Many women are in senior roles, not necessarily the CEO. So I thought, if I get better, I'd like to pilot bringing together executive women in small groups to focus not only on their career issues, but aligning mind, body, spirit, and career. So that's how I started the Key Women's Leadership Forum. And that's what came out of that whole
Okay.
ordeal. That was a gift. I want to go back to your original
Yeah,
question,
yeah.
though.
No, that's wonderful context because, your reminder to me and to watchers and listeners to really prioritize the things that we're passionate about right now is a great reminder. So thank you. You, of course, had to have a very difficult experience to get reminded of that yourself. So, yeah, let's unpack those three things that you
Yes,
learned, I guess,
I will.
starting with letting go, right?
Yes. And so, okay, I gave you the big picture and how it proceeded, but what was the process? Okay, so after my first surgery, I was furious because I got sick again. And this time I felt, and it turned out that I had contracted a bacterial infection on the table and had endocarditis, which is very dangerous. My heart was filling up with bacteria and it was not detected. And so, um, you know, I had to let go of the possibility that I can be laying here being miserable, or I can just enjoy as much as I can the moment. So surrendering to the moment became very important. And hand in hand with that, the second thing was forgiving. I was so mad at the doctors for damaging me because the original procedure, it wasn't for the faint of heart, but it was nowhere near as dangerous as it became because of the infection.
Hmm.
And so as I slowly progressed, I looked at, okay, what can I be grateful for? And so every day I would look for things. And some days, I'll be honest with you, it was hard. And some
Yeah.
days, I was pretending like I was letting go, but I was in so much pain and I was so tired that, it was like, I don't want to bother. But I kept reminding myself, no, I want to do this in terms of surrendering and really letting go. And that's a concept that has been around for a long time, but people are talking about it more and more. When we talk about being mindful or staying in the present, it's really letting go about the anticipated future or fears about the past and really staying present to where you are. So letting go became very powerful to me.
Yeah, I've got a thought I want to share with you because what's
Sure.
running through my mind as I'm listening to you tell the story, and now this is the second time that I'm hearing the story, and I'm hearing things, at least in my mind, I'm interpreting things that I didn't interpret maybe the first time. And that is, Mary, that my platform is 5 pillars, right? Health,
Mhm.
fitness, career, relationships, and legacy.
Right.
And a common question that I'm asked is, why is health and fitness separate when they're really very interrelated? And my simple response is, health alone is a humongous pillar. Let's
Mhm.
not make it any bigger. Fitness deserves its own pillar, but in health, there's physical and mental health. And it seems to me that your experience impacted both your physical health as well as your mental health. And I'm wondering if maybe you can, first of all, do you agree? And would you want to comment on that?
You're right on with that, Bernie, and I would separate them as well. And let me tell you why. Uh, Focusing on your health is a positive habit that builds your strength. And truthfully, the doctor told me if I hadn't been as fit as I was, I probably would have died. But the health is, my dad died at 42 of a heart attack. I mean, I'm not saying that this was all because of genetics, but we all have something. And your health and doing the best things for your health are a huge area of focus. So I see them as related, but I do think it's important to have the habit of working out, doing things that you enjoy doing, but getting the right kind of exercise, the cardio, the strength building, especially as you get older. All of those things are very, very important, but and taking the right vitamins and those kinds of things. But then there are health things that come up. I have a lot of friends I used to run with that have terrible knees. So,
Mhm.
so the they kind of went overboard a little bit on physical activity, running marathons, and now their health is really impacted and they've had knee replacements.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they're very related.
Okay. Now, the 3 lessons that you documented in your blog posts, letting go, forgiveness, and gratitude.
Right.
Once again, similar question, Mary. How do those impact other areas of your life, specifically in my 5 pillars, right? Your career, because clearly you did not retire,
Right.
your relationships, and to whatever extent your legacy quest as well.
Well, for me, just staying in the moment and not allowing fear. And you have an element of PTSD if you've had the kind of surgery I had. So, it's important to manage that. So one of the things I talk about in some of the writing I've done is a technique from Dr. David Hawkins, who wrote a great book called Letting Go. And I use this technique. It's very simple, but it's very powerful. And that is feel the emotion. Like for me, it was feeling scared and discouraged, but just feel it, but don't hook it back to a story or to a in it awful or to the future. Just allow your body to feel it and breathe into it. And the feeling does dissipate. So you're beginning to let go and feel better about those things using your body, but not necessarily using all the self talk that can be very negative in that situation. So now I step back from situations when they become really tense, or I notice that I'm getting overly invested to the point where I might not be hearing others. Take some breaths and redirect myself. So letting go is really about letting go of the outcome. I had to let go of the outcome until my heart got better, till my ejection fraction got to 52. I couldn't pick up that same work schedule. But when I picked it up the next time after the surgeries, I had this energy beyond my own previously because I was really doing something I was passionate about, and it was the women's forums. It was impacting women's lives, and then these executive women would share this with those they led. So I felt, to your other dimension, legacy, that this was part of my legacy.
Yeah, clearly. And not only a part of your legacy and a big part of your legacy, but also your career pillar, right? Because you channeled all of that passion, all of that devotion into this chapter of your career. And you did it so beautifully and so effectively in ways that not only impacted a lot of women, but was just good for you and your career. You were doing something you felt really, really good about.
As a
So,
speaker, I have talked about the topic of a large client asked me to address their annual meeting, and they asked me to speak about ways of staying calm in the craziness of how life has become, especially when you work. They worked in a very customer focused service, and so there was a lot of complaining and a lot of stuff going on. So one of the techniques I actually taught from the stage was something that Heart Coherence Group has done a lot of research and a lot of work on heart coherence, aligning your heart and then coming together with other people and aligning yourselves at the same time. So we were talking about first, what is some of the breathing and what are some of the ways using coherence techniques that you can personally surrender and stay calm, and then how can you as a team employ those together. And so this did spill over into my career, sometimes very directly.
now, you said earlier something I want to come back to because it's powerful and it's very true. You said letting go and forgiveness go hand in hand, right?
They
When you
do.
let go, you have a greater, my words, not your words, greater capacity to forgive. And speaking for a friend, wink, wink, forgiveness does not come easily to a lot of people.
It
Again, speaking
doesn't.
for a friend. So maybe you can speak to that because, like, what is your view of that now, meaning on the other side of that experience versus previous to that? Did you look at, letting go and forgiveness differently before you went through this experience?
A bit. I have always, I did my doctoral dissertation on empathy. So I've always been interested in things of the heart, compassion, empathy in different forms. So I noticed that when someone would apologize to me and they were genuine, I could forgive them very easily. The things that were not easy to forgive were when people didn't even acknowledge that they did something hurtful, even if they found out that they did. And so I was a conditional forgiver as opposed to, in the spirit, and whatever your spiritual beliefs, but, Christ and Buddha and, a lot of spiritual masters have talked about the power of forgiveness, but it's not a
Mhm.
selective thing. So my challenge was this. I mean, think about it. Here I am, a perfectly well person. I had the surgery. I reported all the symptoms I was having. I didn't even go into some that, today, but I had some symptoms that would have alarmed anyone. And my surgeon, who I'm not going to mention at the time, ignored those. And he was, south of me. So it was very difficult. So I got to the point where I almost died because my second surgery, my husband was with the doctor. It was 9 hours and was just to save my life. And so at this point, they were taking all the infection out of me. They were replacing my repaired heart valve with a cow valve, and they weren't sure I was going to wake up. So when I did wake up, and that's when I found out that my injection fraction was limited and all of that, I really wanted to be mad. And believe me, I had a lot of people that said to me, "Oh my God, you got the most amazing court case. I mean, here you were, you need to go sue XYZ healthcare facility." And, I noticed how sick it made me feel just trying to focus on that and wanting to, muster my energy to get mad. And I thought, this can't be the alternative for me. And so I went back to my faith, my spiritual beliefs, and I really started thinking about, well, what is forgiveness, and letting go, and just saying, okay, I'm going to go forward with this and not try to have retribution. Now, I'm not telling your audience don't report, someone who has blatantly hurt you in any way.
Sure.
But I don't think that the surgeon and the facility was actually the facility, and in the prep. Um, They didn't intentionally try to hurt me. And so I really was able to let that go. But it taught me about letting more things go faster. And I noticed that when I did, sometimes the things I thought were faults against me, people weren't even paying attention. It was nothing about me. It was just they were in a bad mood that day or,
Right.
whatever. And so I became amused at all the things I used to let bother me because I'm a sensitive person and how forgiveness really helped me get over that.
So, Mary, it sounds to me like your life's aperture was widened. You
Yes.
became even more aware of opportunities to let go and forgive way beyond this one experience. You're explaining the experience and how you arrived at letting go and forgiving the surgeons and the facility, all the health care practitioners. But in the context of life, it really sounds like it just heightened your ability to do that in general. What I want to know now is, now that you came to that realization of letting go and forgiveness, how did you bridge to gratitude?
Well, gratitude was something that, I always believed gratitude from a lot of the work I had done on myself personally was very important. So I amplified that practice and I forced myself because it's easy to feel very sorry for yourself. You know, I don't look like I used to, at the time. I'm looking better now, but I looked pretty bad then. I can't do the things I used to do. I may not be able to have the career I used to have, so there's a lot, it becomes slimmer. The pickings are slimmer. And so I think gratitude is a practice. One of the things I try to do every day is select at least 3 things I'm grateful for. And that's a wonderful reminder. It's a great practice. And then I always try to be grateful to people when they do something for me. It's amazing how much you get in return. Not that you're doing it for that reason, but gratitude does spawn appreciation and it spreads kindness.
Okay, well, there's so much there. What about in your coaching with executives, whether it's in the context of your women's group or just in general, because I know you work with organizations outside the women's group, this notion of gratitude, how does that fit into career?
Well, I think it really helps people feel better about their career and what they're doing, but it certainly also makes you more pleasant to be around. I think when people are attuned to gratitude, they're paying attention to some of the little things that rushing or multitasking blurs you to. And so I think that on an individual basis, especially, with your one-on-one clients, like an executive coaching work that I do, or when you're working with a team, sometimes you have someone that if you express some gratitude for some piece of what they're doing, even if they're not in general being particularly helpful, it makes a shift. So I found it as a very powerful tool, just like empathizing with others as opposed to rushing right in with something or asking good open-ended questions before you start telling people what you think. All of those things become part of how you want to be with people. And so when I notice that I'm getting crabby, usually that's when I'm tired or when I'm hungry. I try to address that so that I shield myself from my tendency and everyone else's to sort of not be yourself sometimes when you're pissed off.
Yeah. And I know something that you and I have discussed offline is the power of self awareness. I know we're both very big on self awareness. And
Yes.
it seems to me that, this experience that you have had that has led you to letting go and forgiving and being grateful, the level of self awareness that you can experience and then just take that into every single pillar of your
Mhm.
life.
Sure.
I mean, it's transformational.
If you are in every pillar, then it has to go with you.
Exactly. Exactly. You can't leave it outside, right?
Right.
Yeah, that is amazing. So you mentioned something earlier, and I thought you were going to say something else. And what I thought you were going to say, Mary, was that you've had clients ask you to actually share this story for the purpose of what you learned from it, the lessons learned, and how that can be applicable to them. Did I misunderstand that?
I have done that in certain cases, yes. In fact, as I was attracting women to join our forum, I would hold coffees and I would tell an abbreviated version of this story from the perspective of why did I start the women's forum? And it really wasn't so much about me as it is about discovering that the alignment of mind, body, spirit, and career, especially for busy women who are in leadership roles, is critical to fulfillment in life. And I know that's what you talk about. So, my midlife crisis was a little different than some in that it was all about my heart surgery. But I found in what could have been and was for a while feeling like the worst thing that ever happened to me actually was one of the best things, if not the best thing, because of the redirection to purposeful work and the impact it has on other people.
That's amazing. And when I reflect on gratitude one, they're obviously cumulative, right? You have to first let go, then forgive, then be able to look at the situation with gratitude and just have this wider perspective of gratitude. And one of the aspects of
I'm not sure though it's sequential. I know it can be, but letting go is a practice in itself. And sometimes letting go, you're not forgiving anybody. You're letting go of wanting your way. Or, it can be as simple as your partner or spouse really wants to have Mexican food and you want Thai and you really don't
yeah, but
like.
it's hard to forgive without letting go.
Well, you would let that go. You would say, you know what? Okay, let's go have Mexican food. It just letting go of your way. And then there's nobody to forgive. But if you have a fight about it, then that's where the
Right,
forgiveness comes
right,
in.
right.
Yeah.
The gratitude one, though, I want to unpack that one a little bit more because
Sure.
here's what I was thinking about when I was listening to you, and that is there are a lot of people that are struggling in their career through layoffs, reductions in force, which is basically the same thing. And we're seeing it in the government, we're seeing it in private industry,
Sure.
and so a lot of people are impacted by that. And so it's hard to say I'm grateful for when you're in that situation. But if you take that lens and say, well, look, I'm grateful for the relationships I've built. I'm grateful for the experience, which you can list off 25 aspects of detail in your experience and look at that with gratitude so that then you can channel that into going in another direction or in the same direction, whatever it may be, but to whatever that next chapter is, but beginning with the gratitude for all of those things that already exist in your life.
Absolutely. And that's why being grateful if you have good health is huge because there's so many people who don't feel like they can look for work because of their health and how they feel. And so, look at your 5 areas and pick out things in those that you're grateful for. The other thing that's really powerful, that's separate from what we're talking about, but related, which I did all the time and still do, is the importance of visualizing the outcome. So if you can stay open and, do the breathing, stay present, and then have a visual picture where you're actually feeling the emotion of what does it feel like when I get this job that I really like? And I'm picturing what I'm doing. I might not know what it is or what it's called, so, doing that, I used to do that in the morning. I meditate in the morning. And after my meditation, not the same thing, I would work on manifesting what I wanted to do next. So, I used that when I was really sick in the hospital the second time to actually come up with the women's forums. And it sort of fell into place. I had a friend who was concerned about my health, and she came to visit me, and, she's a real feminist. And she's like, oh, I'm tired of all those CEOs and they're mostly men. Why don't you focus on women? And, don't make it a big deal that they have to be a CEO. And a light went off. But, so I would interject also if someone's in that situation, the real importance of manifestation and the correct ways of doing that. And it is to have a vivid picture if you can, and to also feel the emotions you're feeling when you have achieved that.
Mary, this conversation has been therapeutic for me, and I would assume that at least for some people who take the time to listen to this episode or watch this episode, I would suggest the same. I mean, your experience was harrowing, as I said at the beginning in the introduction, but then you also said that it was the best thing that ever happened to you, which is something that's hard for most of us to kind of get our head around given what you experienced. But I understand the point that you're making. I want to thank you for sharing the story, the journey, your learnings, and invite you to share with my listener how they can connect with you and get into your world.
Thank you, Bernie. And I just maybe another way of quickly saying it is that we all have different paths, and sometimes there's a treasure in what it appears to be danger, and the danger is there, but there's a treasure. So please always look for the treasure too. You can get a hold of me at my website, drmarykey.com, email drmarykey.com, no period in the doctor, and also, I'm on LinkedIn, Mary Key.
Fantastic. Well, Mary, my listener knows that all that will be linked up in the show notes for this episode. So, once again, Dr. Mary Key, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Midlife Fulfilled podcast.
Such a pleasure, Bernie. Thank you.